Hey everyone, welcome to this week's video of Table and Craft. This week, we are going to rock, but only a little bit. So last week, I had my first experience being a dungeon master and Dungeons and Dragons, and I had a lot of fun. One of the things I realized when I was doing encounters was I needed more scatter terrain. I'm all about playing Theater of the Mind. I've played Dungeons and Dragons on Discord alone, but I really like terrain as well and maps and putting things out on the table. I decided I wanted to make some rocks, and I made two different kinds of rocks. One of them is going to be a more kind of like tree forest type substrate, and the other one's going to be more of like a mountain rock kind of substrate. They both turned out really well. I made a handful of each of them, and I had a lot of fun doing it. All right, enough talking. Let's go to the table and craft. I'm already at my table, but yeah. So we're gonna be making rocks out of wood, and this bag actually had a rock in it, which I didn't want. So I threw it back, and I found a good piece, or a few good pieces, that I thought would work really well for a rock. I started out with just the regular old Mod Podge and black acrylic paint mixture and coated these rocks. I don't know if this was necessary. I assume since I bought these ones from a craft store that they would be treated. I guess we'll find out. Next was to paint them gray, and I went with a kind of medium gray again to get a nice coating because I wanted that to be the base. I wanted these to look a little bit more exposed to the elements and more like an outdoor rock than an indoor rock, if that makes sense. In order to accomplish this, I used a slightly lighter gray for a heavy dry brushing over the rock. This was going to cover up, honestly, most of that base layer of gray that I put on there, but because it was painted over black, it turned out a bit darker, as expected, but I wanted to make sure that I got a really good lighter gray kind of look going on. To make a kind of heavier dry brushing, really all it is getting a little bit more paint on your brush and basically rubbing the bristles a bit harder on what you're painting. I then went to my go-to light tan color for a little bit lighter of a dry brush. Checking it on my thumb there to make sure it's going to get the right amount of application, and I lightly do a dry brushing to bring up a lot of those highlights. This is something that will happen again later, but it does provide a really nice undercoat before you do your wash. For my wash, I actually took just a black wash with no brown in it, and I watered it down a bit because I didn't want these to get too much darker than they already were. I would be highlighting them again with another dry brushing of the light tan, but this really kind of helped keep them in a brighter color and not knocking down all of the colors before to a darker shade. I wanted to make sure that I had enough space to kind of embellish these rocks, so I cut some chipboard into some kind of blobby looking shapes. I'd never worked with this before, so I was very careful not to apply too much paint and glue and things like that so they wouldn't warp, and I'm happy to report I was successful. I then played around with the pieces that I had painted to kind of do a dry fitting of where the rocks would be. I decided to take these two and kind of stack or lean one on top of the other, and it turned out really well. After the dry fitting was all kind of set, I went to go do a permanent fitting with some hot glue. Again, hot glue is such a great tool. It is a really great adhesive to glue these down. I can't say enough good things about it because you can just glue whatever you like to whatever you like. So I was really pleased with the layout of this, and one thing I wanted to do was to kind of trim off that harsh edge of the chipboard, so I just took a Olfa knife and just kind of cut at an angle and just trimmed it to make it look a little bit more natural and have a little bit more curve to it. It was finally time to start getting my embellishments on. This is a simple technique. I just applied some PVA glue and then kind of spread it around with a toothpick. Later on, I just start brushing it on. The toothpick's still good to push it down into some really narrow nooks and crannies, but basically you just want a nice overall coverage. It was time to add to that base, and I started with smaller rocks than the fake rocks that I had already made, but these were going to be the larger of the rocks and sand that I'd be applying to the base overall. just kind of dropping them in the glue, letting them fall where they fall. And yeah, they turned out to look really great. And they just look like rocks because, well, they are rocks. And then took some other smaller rocks. These were black. Everything was going to get painted afterwards, so it really didn't matter what color everything was. And then I poured on some finer sand over the whole thing, finishing off that nice texture. And this is what we're left with. It looks really good, almost just as is, kind of like a deserty type look, but there was a lot more painting to be done. To help kind of seal that gluing, I did another mixture of the acrylic and Mod Podge coating over top of everything. This would ensure any of those small granules of sand or the other rocks that maybe didn't get quite strong adhesion would get an additional bit of kind of glue coat on top of them. And then another coating of medium gray over the whole base before we started to add a little bit more color to everything. If you watch any of my previous videos, you'll know that I like to add some paint and some color to individual rocks or stones or even brick to kind of give everything a bit more character and make it look a bit more natural. So I went with a really light gray, I went with a light green right here, and then I went with a pretty bright yellow as well, a kind of a more earth tone yellow, and then I end up doing a kind of a muted brown color on some select stone, and then it also gets painted on the entire base, and just kind of select them at random. They don't need to be even, doesn't need to be two of each or whatever, but just kind of be kind of random with it to give it more of an organic look. I then dry brushed everything again with the light tan, including the rock, to kind of give it a better cohesion in the overall look. I used the same watered down wash on the base, but I felt like it needed a bit more contrast, so then I went through it with my regular wash and just dabbed it in places. For the more kind of forest looking one with the kind of more dirt substrate, this was new territory for me, but it's basically the same step as before. Just add some glue, and then I added some dirt, and then made sure to get the edges covered, and then I pretty much just dipped them straight into the dirt to get those edges covered. I then sprayed it with some isopropyl alcohol. This is some sort of witchcraft that helps the glue do what it needs to do to have everything kind of stay together. And then I dripped on some watered down Mod Podge over the top of it, and this gave it a really solid kind of finish to it so it wouldn't all crumble and come apart. I just added the larger of the smaller rocks on these bases and just glued them kind of individually in place on top of the dirt. This could have been done in different order as well, but that's just the way I ended up doing it. I then added some grass embellishments and some flower embellishments that are barely in frame, and it was almost done. And I'm very pleased with how these look. I'm kind of obsessed with them. I want to put them all over my house. Thank you so much for watching. You'll see here that I took a lot of close-up shots of the rocks, even took some macro photos. I hope you enjoy them, and I hope that you might take on this project as well, because it's honestly a lot of fun. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you really enjoyed this video. I'm trying to grow my channel, so please like and subscribe and share it with anybody you think might be interested. I have more videos planned and more scatter terrain planned, especially because that's what I'm in need of really bad right now. Go ahead and give me a follow over on Instagram. I'll put my handle up here on the screen. We'll just do a quick rock, paper, scissors, and it looks like it's going to be right here. Go ahead and give me a follow over there because I post there all the time and I'm on there quite a bit according to the analytics on my phone. But again, thanks so much. I appreciate all of you who comment and like and everything. So I will see you in the next video. In the meantime, have fun, be good to each other, and stay safe.